Welcome to this webinar. This is Kelly McKay, here to talk to you about how to prepare your air conditioning system for summer. So this is going to be for people who are mechanically inclined, who like to do some things on their own, and just to educate you on what it would take to make your system ready to go for this summer so it can keep you and your family cool. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the benefits of maintenance, the amount of energy wasted without maintenance, hot and cold spots in your home, the source of failures on your equipment, safety before beginning your spring AC maintenance, performing the actual maintenance on your AC system, and testing the system. Now, I'm going to speak pretty quick because I don't want to waste your time. I want to make sure that I cover everything as quickly as possible, and we'll get through this quickly so you can feel comfortable doing some of the maintenance tasks on your own to save you some money. So who is this webinar for? Those who are mechanically inclined to perform maintenance on their own air conditioning systems, those who want to learn more about the maintenance process, those who appreciate saving money on their utility bills, those who would like a better understanding of the benefits of maintenance on their home and cooling system. Who this webinar is not for is those who are not mechanically inclined, those who don't believe in maintenance of their air conditioning system, those who don't want to learn more about how a maintenance is performed, those who already have regular maintenance performed by a qualified company or already understand the importance of maintenance. So let's talk about some of the benefits of maintaining your air conditioning system for your home or place of business. For one, it can restore the system's capacity by half to 1 ton of cooling. That's the equivalent of, let's say, if you have a 3-ton air conditioner, and tonnage is just how they rate how much cooling it provides to the home, but somebody came along and installed a 2-ton. Well, that's not going to cool your home. Like anytime it gets to be 90 degrees or higher, it's just not going to cool properly, if at all. The hotter it gets outside, the less it's going to cool. So these units can get so dirty and need to be that's why they need to be maintained, but they can get so dirty that by the time we come out and clean them, or you clean your own unit, it can actually restore that system capacity and make it run and deliver the full amount of cooling again. Reduced runtime by up to 3 hours in any 24-hour period in some extreme cases. So that's an extreme case. What about if it's just lightly dirty? I mean, if you could reduce your air conditioning runtime by 1 hour, what's that going to do to your equipment? It's going to extend the equipment's life. You're probably going to have less failures because it's not running as much. It's not working as hard. You're definitely going to use less energy. I mean, anytime the system's not running, you're not using electricity. And of course, increased comfort. Like the house is just going to be more comfortable. Imagine traveling from Maine to Los Angeles, then back to Maine. I mean, clear across the United States. You probably wouldn't jump in your car and just try to do that without doing any maintenance on your car, making sure, you got enough air pressure in the tires. You got, check all your fluids, maybe get an oil change, just kind of prepare yourself for the journey. Well, this is the type of journey that your air conditioner is about to embark on as we enter into the summer months here in Kansas. So it's important to do the required maintenance so we have a better chance of making this journey through the summer. When it comes to energy consumption, a blocked coil, now we have 2 coils. We've got an evaporator coil that's next to your furnace. It either sits on top of your furnace or underneath your furnace, depending on if you own a upflow or a downflow system. And then we have our condenser coils outside. Now, if that coil is blocked, you could call it loaded. It's a loaded coil. It's loaded with dirt. And when those coils get loaded, it can increase energy consumption by 30 to 40%, which is insane, right? Blocked or dirty coils can increase compressor energy. Now, the compressor is in your outdoor unit, or if you have a package unit, it's in the package unit. But it's the heart of the air conditioning system. And if we have blocked or loaded coils, it's like having a blocked or loaded artery, kind of like it's just going to have to work a lot harder to just maintain. And here we have another picture of, so this is an evaporator coil that gets dirty, and we'll talk about that later here in the presentation. And then here's a condenser coil, and you can see just how dirty that is. It's just completely packed full of cottonwood, dirt, dust, just about anything. If you've got dogs outside, they can lay against it to kind of keep cool because air is getting sucked across the unit. And sometimes I've seen dogs, especially if your air conditioner is in some amount of shade, and their fur gets sucked up into the unit. So all these things clog our coil, and it makes the unit have to work a lot harder to keep our houses and our families cool. Also, if you don't change the filter regularly, which we'll talk about in step one of doing the maintenance, this was an actual blower motor assembly that we pulled out. So here's the blower wheel in a furnace. Basically, this is what moves the air through your home, and then you can see just how caked with junk that gets from not being filtered properly. But if this increases, this type of dirt can increase the compressor energy consumption, also making it, which makes it work harder. The harder it works, the more energy it consumes by 10 to 20%. You could say it's like, imagine the stress that the compressor is under if it's pulling this big load. Like you've got this huge load, and if your compressor was the engine of this car, which is kind of the engine of your air conditioning system, it's probably not going to go very far, right? It's overloaded. It's going to cost you. Do you think this car right here is going to get good gas mileage or bad gas mileage? Just to give you an idea of what it's like when that thing is dirty. Okay. Also, hot and cold spots. So, keeping a clean system, making sure that the airflow is what it needs to be. Airflow can literally be increased by 2 times. So, and one thing that I'll share with you about airflow, because I want to make this presentation as educational as possible, so you learn a few things, so it's worth your time, is that anytime you have a hot or cold spot, 9 times out of 10, you've got a duct issue. It's not necessarily because of the system. It can be, it can be some of that, but it's most of the time you've got a duct issue. You've got usually insufficient airflow to a particular room because there's not enough air being dumped into that room. So do you have any hot or cold spots? You know, is there a room that just always is warmer in the summer or hotter in the winter, or colder in the winter? You know, all these things can be affected, and they can be fixed. Sometimes rather easily, sometimes it takes a little more effort. So what causes equipment failure? Well, 92% of all equipment failures is usually due to dust and dirt. And preventative maintenance minimizes the risk of failure. So the more dust and dirt that you get in a system, the harder it works, the increased possibility of failure. Now, I'm not saying that it was ever working right to begin with, because systems all the time are installed on duct systems that aren't adequate, or there's some other types of issues that can create a lack of cooling or lack of heating. But when it comes to just flat failures, it's usually dust and dirt. So step one, let's get into the maintenance now. Step one is to replace your filter. So 1-inch filters usually need replaced monthly. At most, you could go 60 days, so 2 months maybe. Um, a 5-inch filter, if you have a 5-inch filter, those filters need to be replaced every 6 months. The only reason they can go longer is because there's more surface area. So you can see these pleated filters here. This is a 5-inch filter here. Well, the dirt fills up the valleys first and then works its way up to the top of the pleat. So that's why you can get more extended runtime out of those type filters. And then we have a polarized media air cleaner. You replace those media every 3 months. Now, when it comes to filter performance, I just want to talk to you a little bit about this really quickly. 98% of airborne particles measure below 1 micron. So this little chart here gives you an idea what 1 micron is. This big circle here, this big brown circle, that is a human hair magnified. So that human hair is 50 to 70 microns. So to give you an idea of 1 micron compared to 50 to 70, that's that little dot right there. And then you can see ragweed, dust mites, and pollens. Like pollen is 30 to 50 microns. But imagine this, like 98% of airborne particles measure below 1 micron, like they're smaller than that. A particle actually has to be 5 microns in size to be visible to the human eye. And 5 microns and below in size actually pass through our lungs. Now, a flat or panel air filter, they typically have a MERV rating of 1 to 4. MERV is just a way to, it's a unit of measurement that the scientists have come up with to decide how much particulate matter a filter can remove from the air. So 1 to 4, the higher the MERV rating, the more it filters, the more particulate matter that it removes from the air. So these flat panel filters here are not very good, and we see these all the time. They've only have a MERV rating 1 to 4. So what that means is that they have a low removal efficiency for most particle sizes, which equals anything bigger than 10 microns. So it's got to be bigger than this one right here for this filter to catch it. And remember, we just talked about 98% of airborne particles measure below 1 micron. So this thing is just letting you breathe everything. Like this is the stuff you're breathing and it's passing through your lungs. Just not a good filter. It's basically filters like basketballs and bowling balls. That's about it. It'd be like a chain link fence. If this was your filter, like these huge holes here, everything's passing through that, but it'll catch some great big things like a piece of human hair or something like that. Now, the pleated filters, so if they've got these pleats in them, like you've probably seen in the store, these are actually the filters that we use here at Service HQ. Pleated filters, they have a higher MERV rating, which means they catch more particles. And they're actually 10 microns down to 3 microns. So considerably better filtration when you change to the pleated filter. Now, a 5-inch filter is 10 down to 2 microns. So it's really not that bit much performance-wise better than just a regular 1-inch pleated filter. However, you just don't have to change it as often because of the peaks and valleys that we spoke about here just shortly ago. Now, when it comes to our polarized media air cleaners, they filter down to 0.3 microns, meaning all that stuff that your lungs actually filter through, which is 5 microns, like it'll actually filter everything down to 0.3 microns, which is a 97% efficient at filtering all particulate matter, including 97% of allergens. Those are the things that are the allergens are the things that are causing all the symptoms in your home: the sneezing, the itchy, irritated eyes, the runny nose, like everything you can think of that comes with allergy symptoms. This filter right here takes care of 97% of those allergens. Compared to these other filters, they don't take care of much whatsoever when it comes to allergens. Now, beware of some high efficiency filters because not all HVAC system fans can accommodate high efficiency filters without affecting system performance. Those high dollar filters that you see, and I've seen them in all the different department stores, oftentimes they're too restrictive for your system to actually function properly. So as soon as you install that thing, the system's performance is immediately reduced and the cost goes up to operate your equipment. So they're not always a good thing. And the thing that I see the most that irritates me the most is they'll say that they're a 3-month filter. Well, let's face it, everyone, like the best filter would be a piece of cardboard, something that lets nothing through. But we have to have airflow flowing through our air conditioning system for it to function properly. And if we restrict too much of that airflow, it doesn't function properly. The capacity is cut in half. The efficiency of the system and equipment goes down. So there's a fine line. We got to make sure to maintain airflow while filtering as much as possible. Now, when you're if you've if you have one of these filters and you're sliding it into the system, there's always an arrow typically on the side. You can see the arrow here circled in blue. That arrow points towards the furnace. So in this example right here, this is an upflow furnace. You can see the airflow coming in the return, goes through the filter, then through the equipment, and then into the supply ductwork, which feeds your cold air to all your rooms in the house. Now, the air filter typically always has those arrows. It's going to point towards the furnace. If you change the filter in the wall or in the ceiling, then it's going to point towards the wall or towards the ceiling, which is still pointing towards the equipment or the way the direction is flowing. So the only other case is if you have a downflow system, which are typically found in closets. And if you have a crawl space, for instance, the ductwork would be down in the crawl space, so your registers would be on the floor. Then you may have a downflow system, and in the case of a downflow system, the arrow it's still going to point towards the furnace. It just depends on where your filter rack is located. Okay, step 2, let's blow out and or flush the drain line. So the drain line is connected to your evaporator coil, and it needs to be cleaned periodically. It needs to be flushed periodically. So what you can do is just once every month or two, just take a half cup of bleach or Clorox and dump it down that line. And that's going to keep, if there's any standing water in that line, which there shouldn't be, but once in a while there is, that's going to keep any algae from growing in that line, which creates clogs. And you do not want that to happen. So you can treat the line every so often with the Clorox or Simple Green. On this particular drain line right here, you would have to remove that cap that I've got my cursor on there. Remove the cap, dump some Simple Green down there, flush it out. That Simple Green does a great job of cleaning the algae and just cleaning the inside of that pipe out so we don't have any clogged pipes in the future. Now, when it comes to blowing it out, you could wrap a rag around it and then physically blow on it. If you're brave enough, it can be gross, it can be dirty. Sometimes we'll do that, or if we came out to do your maintenance, we would either do that or we would use nitrogen. We keep bottles of nitrogen on our vehicles, and we'd use that to blow through the drain line. Just to go a little bit deeper on how important this is like your system during cooling mode on humid days, it can produce over a gallon of water per hour that needs to drain out of the system. It's just wringing the moisture right out of the system. It's no different than if you've got a glass of iced tea. You got a glass of iced tea filled with ice, like the moisture in the air is going to condense on that glass and form water droplets, and then it's going to drain to the table or wherever the glass is sitting. Well, this is what happens in your air conditioning system. You've got a cold evaporator coil, and you've got hot, humid air being passed over that coil, and any moisture in that air condenses onto the coil and needs to drain somewhere. And on really hot, muggy days, it can be a gallon of water per hour that's draining out of your system. So you don't want to have to walk down in your basement and see this, which could happen if it was left undetected for any amount of time. So if we do a maintenance, or we always offer a drain pan treatment and a drain line safety switch. What this thing does is we actually wire it into the cooling system. So if for any reason the drain line gets clogged, it's going to shut the system off and stop producing water so it doesn't continue to create a flood. Now, when it shuts the system off, that alerts you to know, hey, I have a problem because my unit's not cooling. And then we could come out and blow the drain line out and then get it up and functioning again. But it's just a safety. It's a safety to keep this from happening. And then the drain pan treatments, those actually just keep any algae from growing in that drain line. So you could use one of these instead of a cup of bleach, or those work for about a year, 6 months to a year. Now, if you have a condensate pump, I don't recommend that you mess with it at all, because there is electricity going to it. And anytime we're dealing with electricity, there could be damage, or there could be harm that could come to you. And if you're not an experienced professional, I really don't want you messing with that because I just want to keep you safe. But these condensate pumps, as you can see, there's a lot of working parts in them. And if you have one of those, it actually pumps your water out to the outside or over to your um, over to your drain. Well, then we'll actually clean up the contents of that pump, because there's this black pan here is a reservoir that holds the water, and it just can get nasty, and algae can start growing in there too. So we normally take those apart and just clean them. Now, I got to have this warning here, guys. We do not recommend unqualified persons to mess with any electrical connections or components which may cause injury and or death. This is serious stuff. Like, we all our guys have lots of training to be able to make sure to stay safe. And even though we try to stay safe, accidents still do happen. So for somebody who doesn't do this every single day, we don't recommend messing with it when it comes to a few of the things I'm going to show you here. But it's something that we always include in our maintenances. So step number 3, we're going to make sure that the power is off to our furnace, and we're going to inspect all the wiring connections. Now, if we come out, we're going to actually tighten all these terminals and make sure these Molex plugs are good, make sure all the spade terminals are good. And then we also are going to check the blower wheel, the blower assembly, because like I said earlier, this one right here, this is a dirty, nasty, disgusting blower assembly. And it has no it doesn't mean that the people who lived in that house were dirty, nasty, dirty or nasty or anything like that. It just means that they haven't had proper filtration, which a lot of homes don't. They don't have proper filtration. And if you don't have proper filtration, this is what happens. And you're breathing that stuff, and your kids are breathing that stuff, and your family pets. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've got 4 dogs, and they're like my babies, and I don't want them breathing this stuff because it's not healthy. Um, so we always check to see what the condition of the blower assembly is. And if it is extremely dirty, that's an actual, we do have a charge above and beyond our regular maintenance for that, because it is a lot of work to take all that stuff off, take it completely apart, clean it, put it all back together. It's a lot of work and a lot of extra labor. So it is an extra charge, but it's so important to keep it clean, because just an 1/8 inch of buildup on this blower assembly, it can reduce airflow by up to 30%. Now, that's going to create some hot or cold spots throughout the whole house. That's going to create people from being extremely comfortable, especially on the hottest days. It's just not going to do a great job. So we like to clean them up, make them look shiny again, just like this one. What we also do if we perform the maintenance is we check the blower motor amp draw, and we also test the run capacitor. The run capacitor, anytime you have a motor, it's a generator. It generates electricity. These run capacitors absorb the extra electricity produced by the motor, and it also releases that energy to get the motor started upon every cycle. These get weak all the time. They're a wear and tear item that must be replaced from time to time. So we always test them, and if we find a problem, we'll bring it to the homeowner's attention and let them know that it probably should be replaced. Step 4, we're going to shut the breaker to the air conditioning unit off. And to ensure the power is off to the condensing unit, we test it with a voltmeter at the disconnect. This is a disconnect. This is usually on the outside of the house or where your air conditioner is located. And if you're not familiar with the voltmeter, I don't recommend you do any of this from here on out. Like, you could probably just stop at that. Treat your drain pan, change your filters. I wouldn't call it good at that point, but it's better than a lot of people do, honestly. So if we could just keep our filters clean consistently, like, your unit's going to have a much better chance of working properly for for the length of the summer. Doesn't mean the outdoor unit doesn't need attention, but there's high voltage, like really high voltage electricity out there, and I do not want anybody getting hurt. So, this is on you if you go this far, because I don't want, we can't take any responsibility if you do any of this stuff and get hurt. So be aware that it is high voltage, and it can literally, injure you severely or even kill you. So next, we clean the condenser coil. Once we've realized and we know that the power is off, we like to wash the condenser coil from the inside out, because air is being sucked into this way, like into the coil. So when we wash it, we push it back out the way it came. And if the unit has panels, like this unit right here has no panels, but this one does. And these panels have been removed. So you can see the evaporator coil here, and you see this blanket of junk, which is cottonwood, those little puffy balls of cottonwood floating everywhere. Usually that's what causes that. Sometimes we see a bunch of grass, like people will drive their mowers right by their machine while it's running, and it just sucks that grass right in there. So anytime you're mowing, turn your mower around and blow that stuff away from your air conditioner, so it doesn't create an issue. But you can't stop this cottonwood from getting in here. That's why these things need to be cleaned. um, this is like a clogged artery here. Like, this thing cannot breathe, and if it can't breathe, it's working harder than it needs to. So we take it apart, clean the condenser coil. As far as our maintenance, at this point, we're going to tighten the disconnect connections and the high voltage connections in the electrical compartment in the air conditioning unit. Inspect the whip, inspect the contactor points, test the run capacitor, test amp draw on the fan motor and on the compressor. And then we're going to check the Rubitex, Armaflex. That is the insulation on your suction line that goes. You've got refrigerant lines, 2 copper refrigerant lines that come out of the house and tap into your unit, while the big line is your suction line, and that thing needs to be insulated. So we just check that. If the insulation is damaged, we'll either replace it, or if there's a bunch of it damaged, then we would give you an option to re-insulate it. But we go ahead and tighten these terminals safely with the power off. I don't recommend any homeowner do that. Anybody who is not professionally does this for a living, I don't want you guys to do that. It's just too dangerous. Bad things can happen. So, and I wouldn't mess with the electrical compartment, because you can see there's a ton of wires in here, and it's something that we don't want anybody get taking any risk. I'm just I'm just sharing with you what we do, so you can understand just how thorough our cleaning checks are. Next, we oil the fan motor if it's oilable, and we're going to do the finger test on the bearings. So you're going to have a fan motor here. As you can see on this picture, the fan motor here. On this picture, they just removed the fan motor so they could clean it, which is what we do. So the finger test is just this shaft right here that spins the fan blade, that moves the air through that coil. It's okay for it to have play in and out, but it should have no play whatsoever up and down. Like if it's laying on its side, it would be up and down. So we always test that, because if you have any play whatsoever, it means that the bearings are starting to go bad in that motor. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to replace the motor today, but it could. If we've got a lot of play in it, then the reliability of your system has been jeopardized. Like, it's not going to last the whole summer. So we use a Zoom spout oiler if it's oilable. Typically, if it's oilable, there will be an oil plug on the motor to put a couple of drops of oil in. Step 7, we're going to put the unit back together, but we always have to be extremely careful not to puncture the condenser coil or shoot a screw where it doesn't go, because if we peel back the layers of the unit here, you can see we've got copper aluminum coils. They're copper aluminum coils behind these panels. And if we shoot a screw into one of those or into something electrical, like it's going to cause a problem. It's going to be a big problem, potentially thousands of dollars worth of a problem. So you don't want to take a risk and put a screw in a hole that it doesn't go, because it could cause, exponential damage that you don't want to have to deal with, especially coming on to summer. That's the whole, that defeats the purpose of the maintenance, right? So step number 8, we're going to restore power to the system. We'll turn the thermostat to cool and turn the temperature down several degrees to let the system run. Now, for our maintenances, at this point, we're going to test the refrigerant levels. We're going to test the superheat. We're going to test the subcooling. And these readings, they alert us to any other problems. So once we can look and see what our gauges, what the PSI is on our low side and our high side, or our suction side and liquid side of the system, that allows, it paints a picture of what's happening with the system. So typically, there are two major problems that we find when we're checking refrigerant levels. So, number one is just incorrect refrigerant levels. Like it's either overcharged or it's undercharged. That meaning there's too much refrigerant in it or there's not enough. And what these things cause is they cause increased failure rate, reduced moisture control, meaning you're not going to remove as much humidity from inside the house, so it's a lot harder to stay comfortable. The unit can actually operate noisier than normal. It can create those uneven temperatures that we talked about. It could add as much as 17% to the operating cost. And this literally is found in 75% of equipment tested. Most units are not charged properly. So, with all of that taken into consideration, like you don't want to have to be paying all this extra money to the utility company because of an incorrect refrigerant level. The second problem that it alerts us to when we check those superheat and subcooling and the pressures and temperatures is a possible dirty evaporator coil. Once we get the story of what's happening by testing those things, it'll let us know if there's any dirt on this evaporator coil. This is what the coil should look like, and you can see this layer of dirt that happens, especially if it has not been filtered properly. So after years of operation, dust and dirt will pass through that filter, especially the bad filters that don't do much, and it coats this coil, which 1/20th of an inch of dirt on this coil can result in 21% decrease in efficiency. Now, this is that same picture we showed you earlier. This is an upflow furnace. So on this particular example, the coil sits on top of the furnace and the air is coming in. Passes through the filter, passes through the furnace, passes through the evaporator coil, which is where the entire refrigeration process takes place. And then the air is delivered to each room in your home. So if this thing gets a coat of dust on it, you can imagine what that does to your airflow in your house. Now, step number 9, turn the system on and we take a temperature drop, and we call it a delta T. We're looking for a delta T of 17 to 21 degrees. That just means temperature difference. So if we check the return air, this is an upflow, similar to the system that we just looked at in this slide, similar to this. We got our return right here. We're going to find out what our return is, and then we got our supply coming out the top that feeds the cold air to all the rooms in the home. We're looking for a 17 to 21 degree temperature drop between the return and the supply. So you have to make sure to measure this at least 3 feet from the evaporator coil. Here's our refrigerant line. So this would be our evaporator coil right here in this example. We got to make sure that this temperature probe is at least 3 feet away from that to get an accurate reading. Because if you're too close to it, then you'll get, it's going to throw your temperature off by being too close to that coil. So what's next? Well, if this was too complicated or overly complicated, or you realize that, hey, we do have some airflow issues, or, hey, our unit, like we do have allergens in our home, or our unit runs all the time, like, and you want to reduce that unit runtime by up to 3 hours in an extreme situation, well, then give us a call. If you don't want to deal with this, if you don't want to mess with it, if you don't feel comfortable with it, call Service HQ for all your heating, cooling, plumbing, duct cleaning, and indoor air quality needs. You literally can call us anytime at 316-425-5098. We would greatly appreciate the business. We do have maintenance agreements where we come out twice a year to do this for you, so you don't have to mess with it. The thing about these maintenances, guys, is it increases the safety for you and your family. It increases the reliability of your equipment, so far less chance of breaking down in inconvenient times, because we all know when this stuff breaks down, it's at the worst possible time. And it increases your efficiency So safety, reliability, and efficiency, which means spending a lot less money to the utility company and keeping that money for yourself. So consider these things if you want to try this stuff. Some of the steps that I gave you today, by being extremely safe and not doing anything with the electrical, like I've shared, that is for the professionals. It is not necessarily for any regular homeowner. So but these are the things we check in ours, and if you would like us to come out and do that, we'd be happy to do that for you. So give us a call. um, that's all I got. So I hope you learned some stuff. I hope you realize the benefits of getting your system maintained, because uh, it's just it's definitely worth it. It just definitely worth it. It's just your family's too important, your money is too important to ignore this stuff. So guys, my name is Kelly McKay here for Service HQ. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.